welcome to the program.
Thank you, and hello from Gaziantep.
Well, you mentioned where you are, which is obviously really close to the Syrian border, only about 100 kilometers from the center of Aleppo. You have a lot of Syrian refugees there. Can I ask you to comment on why your ally, Russia, is denying even your own evidence that what happened to those Syrians last week was a chemical attack by the regime?
We're surprised that even in the context of such a crime, the use of chemical weapons, that Russia is not managing to distance itself from Assad regime. I mean, that's really unfortunate. What can be said there? Clearly, the evidence that we have from those victims, it's clear that chemical weapons were used. And United States have also provided evidence of that sort. So denying, again, is clearly a political position. So I think the best way forward is to make sure that this never happens again. And the best way forward is to see how we can find, as I said initially, a ceasefire, a workable one, because there's a lot of disruption, and then move forward with some sort of political settlement.
Yeah, and particularly, it was just mind-blowing to see Sergei Lavrov and President Putin calling for an independent investigation into that chemical attack, and then in the same breath, their ambassador to the UN vetoing a resolution calling for precisely an independent investigation. I believe the investigators are waiting in Turkey, ready to go and do their job.
Well, you've just summarized, actually. That was a perfect summary. On one hand, you call for an independent investigation, and then a UN resolution for an independent, investigation for Syrian regime to cooperate is vetoed.
Well, look, let's move on, because obviously you are in a strange position allying with Russia on this issue, but you also have a very controversial referendum coming up in your country this weekend. I say controversial because everybody is having their own ideas about what actually is about to happen. A referendum on constitutional changes is being put to the people. Let me start by playing what one of the opposition leaders has said about this referendum and get your response to it.
One man will decide how many ministers will be in the cabinet. One man will decide on their duties. One man will decide on the number of president's deputies. One man will decide what their duties will be. The parliament will be completely bypassed.
So what he's saying is that one man is President Erdogan, and what's at stake is turning Turkey into a presidential system rather than a parliamentary one. Do you think it's going to be passed? And what do you say to people who are concerned, as your German foreign minister said recently, that Turkey is moving in the direction of a dictatorship?
No, Turkey is actually going to strengthen its democracy and rule of law. What we're doing is simple. We have a 94-year-old republic that has managed to generate 65 governments. The average lifespan of a government has been less than 18 months. What we want is stability in administration. People will go to the ballot box. They will elect a parliament. The parliament will be the monopoly for legislation and also scrutiny of the government. And the president will be an executive presidency, and there will be also independent judiciary. So clearly the opposition is against this. We can understand that, but much of what is being said is purely disinformation.
It comes within a context of increasing powers being concentrated in the hands of Mr. Erdogan, and in the context of what you've had since the attempted coup last summer, which is a wholesale crackdown on civil servants. I mean, something like nearly 135,000 over the last several months, including members of the military, members of all sorts of bureaucracy and civil administration, and teachers and journalists, of course. So that does worry people. You can understand that, right?
Well, Turkey has gone through a very rough patch, a difficult period. Turkey has faced multiple terror attacks from Daesh, from PKK, and also last year, Turkey experienced a very bloody coup attempt. Turkey actually is saving its democracy and rule of law because the coup was aimed at destroying rule of law and destroying a legitimately elected government. So even though it has been a difficult period, ultimately, I think people should give us the benefit of doubt that Turkish judiciary system will work, that Turkey will remain on course to enhance its standards of democracy, to continue to strengthen its rule of law.
Well, you've asked us to give you the benefit of the doubt. Clearly, we're all going to have to watch and wait and see what happens after the referendum. But what I want to ask you also very clearly is the president himself has said that he needs these extra, as you call them, democratic powers in order to keep Turkey safer. How is that going to happen in a time when he hasn't been able to do that? You've got an unprecedented spate of suicide bombings and attacks on Turkey, its civilians, its democratic institutions.
Well, first of all, Turkish judicial review, system will work. And people who are not involved, who are not complicit in the coup, or not loyal to a religious cult, clearly will go back to their jobs. Already, in fact, we have readmitted thousands of people who who filed a complaint, and their cases were reviewed, and that has worked out. Now, as far as our efforts to contain terror is concerned, I think Turkey has been successful over the past few months. First of all, we went into Syria and we pushed Daesh, ISIS, away from our border, and there hasn't been any ISIS attacks on Turkey. Secondly, we built a wall along the Syrian border, and that clearly has helped us contain illegal crossings. This is very helpful. Thirdly, I think when you have a coalition governments, when you have weak governments, when you have political instability, it's harder to deal with terror threat. So what President Erdogan is saying is that, look, let's achieve stability in administration. Let's get governments that could last for 5 years, and so that they can have a strong, sustainable response to these threats.
Turkish Finance Minister Mehmet Şimşek, thank you so much indeed for joining me.
Pleasure. Thank you.